Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 49th episode of Toast the Talk on the Toast Network. Another exciting weekend. This is becoming a habit that I wouldn't mind being addicted to. Neither would any of the panelists here, except maybe Dinesh, but we'll get to talk about him in a bit. Uh, Naren's visiting us in the IST zone, uh, along with Vignesh joining in after a while, and we have a newcomer in Dinesh. The reason why I brought that up is Dinesh, while his all-time favorite is Kimi, but in the current stock, he does have a soft spot for Max Verstappen. We haven't had anyone with a Max soft spot in a while. And the reason why I said I'm okay with this new habit is we haven't seen Max winning in the past few races, which has been routine programming for the last few years and has got everyone a lot more excited. Let's hear a summary of today's race and why everyone's excited about the new orange that sort of played around Hungary. So let's start off with Naren, if you want to give a quick summary of the race today.
Right. Okay. So the race was pretty non-eventful, let's say, compared to the other races, except for the first lap. Obviously, the first lap we had a lot of tussle between the first two places, obviously with Norris, Piastri, and Verstappen. I was able to see that on the onboard, Kevin Magnussen has gained 5 places in the first two laps. But if you also see, there were actually um, people who are really performing well, like Checo Perez and George Russell, who were in they eliminated in Q1. But if you see, they still gain like 10 places, so which means that even if you are still bad in qualifying, if you have a good car, you can still perform. Is what is probably the end game here. But apart from that, yes, we saw a beautiful race by Piastri winning his first Grand Prix. And I also see, like we have already discussed, that the Orange team is inching close by to probably being the second best team in this year's championship. But we'll have to see after summer break how it all unfolds.
Yeah. PST also coming with the record of the first driver in this century to win a race. We've had people born in the previous century so far winning, so it's also another major milestone there. Vignesh, what are your thoughts in terms of the race today or the racing weekend in general?
Yeah. So there were a few things which actually brought my attention. First is that one of the harsh drivers is going to end their contract at the end of this year. So some new replacement at Haas. Secondly, right, okay, there were a lot of crashes. So like for me, the qualifying was more eventful. And more than qualifying for me, the practice was more eventful because Mercedes pit wall went blank thanks to CrowdStrike and the Microsoft issue,
And
which
CrowdStrike being a
was
sponsor.
yeah, CrowdStrike being Mercedes' primary sponsors and hitting the global outage was evident in the Mercedes pit wall. That's one thing. And the third thing is that, okay, I was able to finally see glimpses of Hamilton, the defense champion, what he is. And he showed Max that, okay, you might be a 3-time, 4-time world champion, but yeah, I am a 7-time world champion. And finally, it's good to have 7 new race winners in a season after a long time.
Yep. So the joke is Haas didn't have the outage because they had Windows 3.1, uh, unsubstantiated. But with our new panelist on, Dinesh, I want to welcome you aboard and hear your thoughts, especially from a Red Bull standpoint. Max had a pretty grumpy race, not an emotion he's used to. But what are your thoughts of the race today?
Yeah, nice to be here for the very first time. I reckon this is the 49th episode, and I wonder why I wasn't part of one before. And I just have to take blame for myself here. Yeah, my name is Dinesh, and you have to hear my take on why I support Max Verstappen, right? I don't know if I fully support Max Verstappen. I just say he's probably the fastest and the best driver in the lineup currently. Now, talking about this weekend has been pretty eventful. I would just rate it at somewhere around 6.5 or 7 out of 10. I would not go up to the entire 8 or 9 standpoint. Happy that we have a McLaren 1-2, but yeah, just as you said, Max had a very grumpy race. Obviously, that's how Max is. Pre 2021 Max just showed up for a bit, probably because after 2021 he really didn't have much competition for a couple of years, right? In a form of Checo Perez for the first 4 races, and after that it was a cakewalk for him because Mercedes didn't figure out their package. Neither did McLaren. Ferrari, Ferrari has always been Ferrari for the past 10 years. So they didn't figure out the package. So it was very easy for Max. But today, on hindsight, I think he might have thought that Lando might have pushed him away, but you could see the visuals that Lando was turned towards the right. There is nothing that he could do. There was nothing he could do at that particular point of time. And historically, just like how we have seen with Max, if he had a drop of concentration at that particular point of time, he used to do things like this, and sadly it cost his race today. That's what I would say. It's his entire mistake. He blames it on the strategy, but he has had situations where he had overcome things like this before just because he was calm and composed. Yeah, we'll talk more about it.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And Hamilton brings in another side of Max whenever they're side by side. It just gets so scrappy. And today, Max ended up doing a ballet step the second time when he was trying to overtake there. A good question that you bring up is, and this was something we discussed earlier with McLaren, they didn't have clarity on the 1 and 2, like who's the number one driver, who's the number two driver. Today, some of that friction came out as towards the end, Lando did allow PSG to pass through to complete and get his first victory. Maybe this time we can start off with Vignesh. What are your thoughts about the McLaren strategy there? Were they on track there? Did PS3 deserve that win versus, at least Lando's thoughts that came across from his standpoint that he was the number one and he should have been allowed to finish the race?
Yeah, to bring this into perspective, right? I would say, like, okay, I would like to compare it with a similar situation which took place at the same circuit a few years back when Ferraris were 1-2 and Mercedes and Bottas, in this case, Hamilton and Bottas were 3 and 4. Bottas was 3, Hamilton was 4, and Hamilton requested to go past Bottas just to hit the Ferraris. And the beauty is that, okay, Bottas was in that impatient mode that, okay, will a swap take place? Will a swap take place? And at the end, just before the finish line, Hamilton like slows down, lets Bottas pass for third, and he comes fourth. Uh, as a racing driver, as a person who is looking to win championships, every point matters. First is 25 seconds is 18. You're losing quite a bit of chunk, exactly 7 points out of your tally. And that would actually is important for Lando. So from a championship perspective, for him to aim for that glory is evident. But now, from the team perspective, why was Lando forced to do this team orders was mainly because he was pitted first to undercut Piastri in order to buffer him out from Verstappen and Hamilton. So that was a favor which they did to Norris by putting Piastri at a risk. And they had to repay. Norris had to repay that favor. So in terms of a true sportsmanship, yeah, what McLaren did was right. It was not about defining one or two. It was that, okay, your teammate helped you at one point, you helped the teammate at the other point. But on that perspective, I would say, see, sportsmanship surpasses your rivalry. And that is one thing which Norris also, like, okay, reluctantly did it. But yeah, from a championship and a winning driver perspective, Norris is right. But from a team perspective, to maintain that good sportsmanship, what the team did was right.
Naren, any differing thoughts there?
No, actually, so I actually did not see the complete race but then from what I was actually seeing in some of the interviews in Sky Sports, what actually Lando was saying is, at least PSP was saying is that it was a tough fight because even on the final conference, there was something about having to deal with radio. But on the other hand, Norris was also saying that, yes, I can give the position back because Oscar has helped me a lot of times. I don't know if somebody can be very vocal about saying about their teammates in a press conference and also doing the same thing on the race. It has happened probably like Vignesh was saying in the past, where we had people who helped the other, maybe in Ferrari's case, Michael Schumacher also did the same thing once. I think with Rubens Barrichello, if I remember it right. They were on the same lane, and he helped Rubens to go forward. So we have seen that happening in the past. I see that some of the teams are still doing it. Some of the teams are not still doing it. So it is probably a case-to-case situation with drivers, but at least in this case, I see that there is a good sportsmanship which is shown to the media and on the track, even though we have some stern messages over there which we don't know.
And that also brings me to another, like, since we are on the 1-2, Sainz' performance over the last few races and the season itself, right? Like Leclerc seems to have broken the Monaco curse, but he's also opened a Pandora's box in terms of cursing himself everywhere else. And Sainz seems to be one of the most dependable drivers at this point without a seat next year. I know, Naren, you have a theory around this. Really wanted to bring that up, especially since Perez had yet another not so great race.
You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So for the uninitiated, me and Vivek had an in-person discussion about how Sainz can be one of the potential second driver for Red Bull, considering the fact that Checo is not actually doing as much as he was doing. But at the same time, you also look at it, he gained 7 positions from being 17th to being 10th in this race, which also leads to the fact that he still has a chance. But there has been a lot of rumors going around about the contract clause that Checo has, that he should be 100 points behind Max and he should be like 5 to 6 places behind Max in the championship and the races. All the theories is still going on. So I still see that if Checo is in a very bad performing state as he is currently, he might be pushed out, considering that Red Bull are being a little very vocal about pushing the drivers out mid of the season when the drivers are not performing. You see, we have very, very limited choices for Sainz to go inside of Formula One if he has to for the next year. And we also have talked about what will happen if Sainz does not get a Formula One seat. Where will he go probably? So we'll have to wait and see if that second Red Bull seat is still for Sainz or is it still for Checo, or does Sainz probably submit himself to a lesser team than Ferrari next year? We'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
at this
just
point,
wanted
Perez
to
is
add.
obviously a little more concerning for Red Bull, primarily because from a constructors' championship standpoint, the momentum that McLaren have picked up over the last few races is now threatening the Red Bull dominance. So far, they were just so far ahead, irrespective of how Perez did, and he generally used to do pretty well. Like, not number two where they expected him to be, but he was still pulling in his weight and getting those points in. But over the last few races, he's barely been able to scrape through some points. And McLaren's been doing a 1-2, 2-3, 1-3 combination, which means there are scoring enough points to at least overtake from a constructor standpoint. So that's
Yeah,
where I
there's a
think a lot of this
conspiracy
risk
going
sort of
on.
comes in.
Yeah, there's a conspiracy going on that when Adrian Newey was like had planned his departure, right? He had just removed one part which none of the people in the Red Bull know, and that's the reason why there is a reduce in the performance for Red Bull. A part which only Newey knows, and he was like, okay, let's go to the next team.
I mean, that's a general joke that we have in code also, right? Like people have a code segment where it's like, if I'm no longer an employee, then do this. So the moment you get fired, the code stops working or the performance reduces. But Dinesh, what are your thoughts in what's probably playing out in the Red Bull camp?
Yeah, seeing the history of Red Bull, they have a vast history of actually using their sister team to fund their drivers, fund the talent, fund the actual talent for their main team. That's how Danny Kvyat got the chance back then. Sebastian Vettel, great champions out there, Max Verstappen. Everyone has made their way from Toro Rosso till Red Bull, and that's how it's always been. Ricardo's one exception in terms of championships, but yeah, he's a pretty good driver as well. The point is, thing is, from the financial perspective, yes, Checo brings in all the money. He brings in the merchandise from Mexico. But one thing that we forget here is that he has cost about 2 million in parts, in terms of parts degradation as well as crashes. So far, only in this particular season, and it is none other than his fault. For example, Daniel Ricciardo has done about 1.3 million in parts, but it was Lance Stroll's fault. It was not Daniel Ricciardo's fault that it was a major crash back then. But in terms of Checo Perez, I think it's in his head that he's not performing. I think he's pressurizing himself. We are all subject to this particular scenario where we over pressurize ourselves because of the expectations. All he had to do is put the car in one piece, and that particular pace of the car will carry him through to P6. That's exactly what he had to do. But now the scenario has changed, that he's going to be in P8 probably in terms of driver's position. That's threatening both constructors championship and Max's drivers championship as well. Because you see, for Lando, Oscar Piastri is actively taking the points of either Max Verstappen, or either it's going to be Charles Leclerc, or either it's going to be Lewis Hamilton. There is a teammate who you can depend on. But where is Checo Perez for Max Verstappen there? If you think in this perspective, I would say Spa is his last race, probably. He made some points today, but it's not enough. Where is 6 points compared to where he should be in podium at least? So yeah, I think Spa is his last race, and he is costing him more than he brings in. So I see 2 to 3 replacements. I agree. There is Naren's theory where he says Sainz is an option, but Sainz is not an immediate option because he's still not into the Red Bull family. He's Ferrari family now, probably. So he's bound to a contract. He cannot be brought in. 2 options that I can see is, one is Yuki Tsunoda replacing Sergio Perez. Another one is Daniel Ricciardo. And out of these two, since Yuki Tsunoda just binned one in this quali session, I think Horner might have something about that too. He might probably think the other way. So I would say if Daniel Ricciardo brings home points at Spa, he is in prime position for that seat for the rest of the season. I agree that he's not the optimal choice, but for the rest of the season, he's the safest choice where he would bring podiums and occasional podiums and regular points. That's what Red Bull should be looking at. Yeah.
And there was a long due path for Ricardo if that works out. When he was brought back, everyone was like, this is the plan, never really cut through. But speaking of podiums, Lewis Hamilton is finally making a habit of it after a while. And let's go to our in-house Mercedes fan, Vignesh, when he's not an FIA fan, to kind of share your thoughts on, the resurgence in Mercedes, specifically with Hamilton, because again, George, from where he's usually been Mr. Dependable, this is probably a slightly more forgettable race for him.
Yeah. So first of all, would like to congratulate Sir Lewis Hamilton on achieving the 200th podium, a feat which I don't think might be matched by any other human. Um, the lifespan of the career is what determines this, and also his consistency. Taking into that, okay, Mercedes have had a good weekends for the last few races. They have been consistently performing, and that's one thing. The McLarens have gone way past them, but then for Mercedes to again come back winning podiums with Lewis, and also George won once. So that's a good sign for Mercedes resurgence. Now, from my point of view, Mercedes have one thing to worry, is that okay, they being how I say, a manufacturer team, they are not able to pull as much as performance as probably a customer team like McLaren is pulling out. So that should be one cause of concern for Mercedes, which they would like to tackle in order to go forward. The second thing is, what Mercedes needs to do is either get Newey from Daddy Stroll, or do some kind of magic, but have your team set out that well. And finally, considering that okay, now Mercedes is able to win, or like at least challenge for the podiums, right? I think that should not be any doubt in the mind of Sir Lewis Hamilton that okay, did he take the right call to Ferrari? Now, only time will tell whether the Ferrari resurgence is there on cards or not. But yeah, all these three are positive factors and some things which Mercedes will have to see. But overall, considering that okay, they have a good talent pool and probably Kimi Antonelli might replace Lewis, Mercedes are at least well settled off for the future. Considering they have two young drivers in George Russell and Kimi, their at least future for the next 7-8 years is set out.
Yep. And I'm not going to go too deep on this because our previous episode we spent quite a bit discussing about that specific scenario. But before we wrap up, and it's also the summer break coming in for our F1 teams and viewers, any thoughts that each one of you has on the parting front, on advice that you'd be giving to the F1 teams, or thoughts that you have on what the F1 teams will be focusing on during the summer break as they come back into the latter half of the season, which now sounds a lot more exciting and probably closer than what we thought at the start of the season. Let's start off with Dinesh.
Yeah, with respect to McLaren, Mercedes, as well as Red Bull, their eyes will be actually on the Constructors' Championship. Red Bull, obviously, to actually regain or even keep the Constructor Championship to themselves. McLaren, for respect to McLaren and their win funnel, right? The Constructor Championship will do a lot for them, basically, because it will give them the extra money for the research. I heard one Zach Brown say that 2024 will be our year where we will actually turn things around. And he's right. He's right there where he will challenge for the championships and podiums. He said podiums, but I think he's in a bit of a fix now because he didn't expect this to be a championship fight. He expected this to be a fight where he will be regularly in the podiums and he will go for 2025. Now, one thing that they have to set themselves straight is within their team, basically, who the first driver is and who the second driver is. Basically, that's a major issue for them now, since you could see in Lando's eyes what they meant actually today, because it was fire in his eyes, literally. And this is something that they have to fix immediately. That's no go. Second, with respect to Red Bull, they have to find a proper driver, second driver that can aid Max Verstappen here, because he immediately needs, now he is not in the luxury of 2023 where he was 15 seconds ahead of everybody else. With respect to Mercedes, this is a very interesting discussion right here with respect to Mercedes, because is George Russell the actual driver that Toto Wolff wants? That's a major question, because all the discussions around here, say for example, all the technical discussions and feedback has always been around Hamilton for the last 12 years at Mercedes. When he joined in 2013, they had the luxury of Niki Lauda back then for all the technical feedback and everything. After his passing, Sir Lewis Hamilton was a legend himself, so he could give all the technical feedback that they need. But is George Russell is in the same level as Lewis Hamilton to guide the team? Because Kimi Antonelli is an unknown quantity. He's 17 years old. We don't know if he's going to be a Max Verstappen or he's going to be a Zhou Guanyu. So it's very interesting to figure out what they're going to do with the rest of the season as well as 2025 lineup. So very big thing coming up for all of them. And one quick mention is for around Haas as well as RB. Two interesting discussions, because they are going to bring in Ocon as long as I know. which is I don't know what's going to happen there because that's a very difficult decision, but I know why they brought that up. And I want to see Liam Lawson in that second seat of VCARB as soon as possible if Daniel Ricciardo moves up or Yuki Tsunoda moves up. So it'll be a nice scale for Horner to fix all the seats coming up. Yeah,
Makes
that'll be.
sense. Yeah, a lot of exciting thoughts over there and make it a lot more interesting as we get into that space. Any last thoughts from you, Naren?
Yes. If you, I was just seeing the championship points, Red Bull is at 389, McLaren is at 338, Ferrari, surprisingly, is in 322, considering the performance they had. So I would say McLaren should keep on consistently doing what they have to do. Ferrari, they have to still fix their strategies, which they will be fixing. So apart from that, I am also looking at the midfield: Aston Martin, Red Bull, Haas, and Alpine. So I see that we still have if you see after Mercedes, all the rest of the teams are less than 100 points. So we will know if the midfield still is on the top, or we I see Aston Martin has an opportunity. Red Bull, Honda, which is the Alpha Tauri, has to do something different. Haas is at 27 and Alpine at 9. So I believe so it will be in the same order. So if you have to look at the top, Red Bull, obviously they have to up their game. But we still have a lot of theory surrounding what the second drive, so we'll have to wait and see. But I see that the second half of the season will be very, very exciting. Because at least the last year, second half was exciting because we did not know that McLaren would be performing so well in the second half of the season. But now we know that McLaren is performing. So we are prepared for what will come in the second half of the season. That is what keeps us exciting for the second half. So let's see.
Yep. Any other thoughts you want to add on, Vignesh?
Yeah. So one thing is that, okay, this would be one suggestion which I would want all the teams to try and implement is get your straight line speed fixed. Out of the remaining races, which I see, you have Belgium, you have Italy, you have Azerbaijan, you have USA, you have Mexico, you have Brazil, you have Las Vegas and Qatar. All these are high speed circuits which have extreme long straight lines. Fix your straight line speeds and you have a chance on championship. First. The second thing which I want is at least sort out your drivers. For McLaren, sort out your 1 and 2. Mercedes, sort out with George Russell what you're doing. Ferrari, get Sainz a seat. He will be in a better shape of mind to perform at least for the remainder of the season. Williams, try, improve. For me, the biggest thing is Aston Martin. I saw a wonderful performance at the start of the season and suddenly the entire performance has diminished. Lawrence Stroll has to understand that he's investing something and the performance needs to come up. Finally, Alpine, they scored a few points in the last few races, but then nothing. These would be a big concern for most of the teams, considering that, okay, all these would add on to your money, the kitty, and also to your wind tunnel time, probably. So you should ensure that, okay, you're in a better seat. And finally, what I want is that as the 2026 Rex comes up, be in a better shape, that I don't see a clear divide between F1, F1.5 and F2. I need it to be an F1 package. All 10 teams racing as we used to do in the Senna Prost times. There was chance for every team to win the competition. And this is what we expect from fans.
And on that note, lot of high standards as panelists that we are putting for the F1 fraternity, all the drivers, all the constructors. Key focus, as highlighted, over the last few years, and we've seen this happen repetitively over time, that you have this phase where, the front and the back sort of diverges. We are seeing some instances, green shoots of that convergence happening, which is going to make the second half of the season a lot more exciting, as all of us have just iterated. But hopefully, 2026, as the regulations come in and people try to figure out what needs to be done, we're going to see a lot of mix up over there in terms of different teams identifying how they go about, collect enough data till we then finally, probably 27, 28, we're probably again going to settle into some sort of rhythm where we're going to see one constructor who's truly figured this, leading the pack, and then having an eventual competitor come in to take them over. Till all of that happens, rest in all the conspiracy theories that you have. Type them in the comment section. Feel free to let us know how you feel about this episode and what you want to hear from the panelists on future episodes of Toaster Talk. And stay glued for our special 50th episode of Toaster Talk that we will come up with pretty soon during this break. So keep your eyes glued, share, like, subscribe, whether on YouTube or Spotify or any other place that you listen in to. With that, good night and see you on the other side of the summer break.